Hey guys, what's up? So we're doing a bit of an instinct video here. I'm really new to the whole like top 10, top 15, top 25 type video. I know guys like Blunder specialize with those kind of stuff. Little clickbaity headlines and then followed up by like all sorts of analysis and like the top however many things of any certain category. And I totally respect that. But someone today asked if I could do a top 10 black and white Pokemon video. And of course, as I'm just such a black white fanatic, I did that, but I also took it a step further. I went all the way through my top 25 Pokemon. That's right, and there are some surprise picks in here as well. I separated them out into 6 tiers. Um, Now, each tier is in order. So, for example, Latios is my number one Pokemon in Black White Overused, and Ferrothorn is my two. Or Tyranitar is my three, whereas Excadrill is my five. You can see in the two tiers that are kind of in front of you. However, the tiers indicate a certain level of closeness and specific viability that cannot really be discerned otherwise. For example, Latios and Ferrothorn, in my eyes, are the two clear best Pokemon in Black White Overused, hands down. There is a clear gap between Ferrothorn and Tyranitar. I don't think you could argue that Ferrothorn is worse than Tyranitar and Black White Overused right now. However, I do think there's argument between Latios and Ferrothorn for the top slot. Or more importantly, in bigger tiers, like let's go down to tier four. I think there's a lot of argument between things between Thundurus, Therian, and Garchomp. Like for example, you could easily rank Alakazam above Reuniclus, or you could rank Keldeo above Thundurus T, and I wouldn't really blink an eye. You could do that justifiably so. And in fact, a lot of people might feel in the majority that some of those things are ranked in an order that they shouldn't be. And this is just my opinion. The great thing about these lists is everyone is able to give their own personal spin to them. And while I have a lot of black white experience, arguably more than just about anyone else nowadays, besides some guys that have been around and playing in tournaments since 2010, which predate me, like the BKCs of the world, or even McMegan, Solwyn types, or Jama types, besides a handful of players that have been playing in tournaments in black white just for a bit longer than I have been, the fact of the matter is that I have a lot of experience, so I'm giving you my opinion. You, as the viewer, are allowed to agree or disagree. You are allowed to feel differently for different reasons, or not even on reason, but just on your own instinct and whim. That is completely fine. This is not me telling you guys, oh, these are the best Pokemon, here's why, there's no debate. No, 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 no. This is completely and utterly my opinion, and I feel a need to precursor this video with that little note. However, I just want to get a little backstory. I'm just gonna, I'll just put this music on loop. Yeah, okay, my bad about that. But anyway, as I was saying, so basically, I think these are my top however many Pokemon, 25 Pokemon in Black White. I'm also going to do a similar video on SMOU, which I find to be my second best tier, and I know it like the back of my hand as well. And again, I do have a lot of experience with both tiers, but this is not like a definitive list. And they actually do vary from the viability rankings, which are officially voted on. And in a way, best Pokemon kind of separate a bit from viability, but they're kind of two peas in the same pot, if you will. So we're just going to go with this list as it is. For my personal list of the best Pokemon in Black White overused right now. Keep in mind, this isn't a historic list, as then you probably see Tyranitar a little higher, Extra a lot lower, Landorus a little lower, etc. But no, this is a right now, the current metagame list. So anyway, now that we've gotten our little warning slash viewer advisory message aside, let's get down into the list. So tier one, Latios and Ferrothorn are very clearly the top two Pokemon in Black White, in my opinion. Latios is the face of Black White overused. It is quite literally broken in my eyes. Yes, there's counterplay to it, such as Ferrothorn and Pursuit Tyranitar, which happen to be 2 and 3, and they are 2 and 3 for, well, some very compelling reasons, and we'll get into those in a bit. But Latios is still always a force to be reckoned with. Ever since Sleep got banned, I've been ranking it above Ferrothorn just because of the ability to run Trick, which is great against Ferrothorn and against other potential walls like Chansey, the rare Jirachi, and some other Pokemon that we'll touch on later. But Trick plus Recover variants are great. Dragon Pulse is very spammable in the fourth slot a lot as well. And of course, Draco Meteor and Surf are pretty much staple status and great. Draco Meteor is really impossible to not make progress with. You're even doing 35% to Ferrothorn if it's especially defensive. You do over half to even especially defensive Tyranitar, although you can't 2-kill it unless you have rocks and spikes or it's more of offensively geared, as you need to do 66 to 2-kill it without Stealth Rock. So yeah, even if you're not doing that, you still have to do like 58 to 2-kill with Stealth Rock, and it's still a big ask. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to take into consideration there. The fact of the matter is that the reason why Tyranitar tends to run specially defensive with Chapel Berry is largely Latios. The reason why Ferrothorn is a staple on rain teams is largely Latios. The reason why Jirachi sees any usage at all in the metagame, which largely is unfriendly to it is Latios, so on and so forth. Latios is such a centralizing force within this metagame, and in a way, Black and White is in a continuous state of broken checks broken because of how good and how potent Latios is. However, that state arguably also leads to a certain degree of balance, which is understated by the casual player. For example, Latios being in the chair keeps things like Thunderous Therian and Keldeo in check, or it could potentially stop a Calm Minding Nicholas by Draco Meteoring through it, or Dragon Pulse doing over 50% net, or being able to trick it, of course, if it gets a Calm Mind or two up, which is very important in keeping it in check. Moreover, Latios, if it were to be removed from the tier, could potentially create a domino effect of chaos. But it being in the tier, of course, is arguably problematic, as now that it's not forced to deal with Sleep Talk Roulette half the time. It's really able to just drop Dracos across the entire metagame, and there's very little stopping it aside from Timely Pursuit. It gets in safely in almost every game, at least once, if not twice, if it's not pursued immediately. It's going to force kills. Oftentimes, you even have to fodder something that's chipped to get Tyranitar to begin with, or you have to go to Ferrothorn repeatedly. So there aren't really a ton of safe ways out. And if you think about it more and more, which I have been lately, Latios is kind of a necessary evil in Black Widow U, but the fact of the matter is that while it is evil in a sense of like broken, it kind of is great in that it's something that is going to always be like a rock in team building, and it's always going to pack a punch no matter what. So it's going to be a forceful catalyst of progress, but at the same time, it's also something that keeps you proactive, keeps you on your toes when facing it. And I feel as if it almost stimulates a certain level of competitive game flow that really not a lot of people can appreciate enough about Black White, and it's one of the reasons why I love the tier as much as I do. It doesn't have as much nonsense like Oras, SM, and even SS do. That is kind of stimulated by defog, magic art stamp, passivity, regenerator, etc. And while those elements definitely can stimulate positive gameplay and competitive elements, the certain level of direct proactivity that is found in Black White Overused, I find to be great, and I think that Laudius is one of the main reasons for that. One of the main catalysts, one of the big hitters, the original nuke, if you will, which I labeled it as in the prior video. And I think that Latios' presence in the tier is one that really defines the metagame and sets the tone for a very fast-paced and inherently offensive metagame, even in balanced versus balanced games, because everything is set in a timer due to hazards, due to sand, and you can only prolong that timer so much with things like Poison Oak Gliscor, or Regenerator on Amoonguss, or Leftovers, or Protect Rain teams, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that always caving in, there's always ways to make progress, there's always ways out, and you have to make the most of every single turn, especially in the early to mid game. Positioning is so crucial, and being able to capitalize on that with getting Latios in a timely fashion and using it to chip the right thing, or kill the right thing, or force a fodder so Tyranitar comes in and then Tyranitar gets chipped. Provoking those sequences is what opens up games. And while those things aren't direct black and white check and countering, and while there are checks and counters to Latios, I think that the fact that it opens the doors so much as it does is just really a great part of Black and White OU. And I mean, on top of this, the choice spec set doing all that. Scarf is obviously great. It can do the same trick shenanigans, but also it's just the best revenge killer, hands down. Of course, there are drawbacks such as it being much weaker, which means that breaking through Ferrothorn with that trick is borderline impossible. Tyranitar is going to be able to keep you in check much more easily, even potentially hard switching in against you, and you aren't able to break through things like Tentacle and Rain. In fact, Rotom Wash can even 1v1 you if you don't trick it immediately. For example, it could live 2 Draco Meteors if the specially defensive set, have leftovers and pains put off, and other steel types become more problematic. Like, for example, Surf doesn't kill an offensive extra on one hit, and then it could just destroy you with Iron Head. But the viability of that Choice Scarf set has opened up a whole new slew of team structures, specifically in the spectrum of Rain, but also dual Psychic Sand teams. And I feel as if those structures, enabling things like Stealth Rock Landorus T instead of a Choice Scarf Landorus T, or Breaker Keldeo with Choice Facts that we're going to get to later on instead of Choice Scarf Keldeo, is really cool and just opens up the tier as a whole. And I find Latios just to be one of the most fun, the most progress-oriented, and the most no-nonsense Pokemon in Black-White. And a tier that largely is defined right now by no-nonsense in the wake of the Sleep Band, and the Goth Band, and the Doug Band, and so on and so forth. And that's also what I love about Black and White. But yeah, Latios is the clear number one for me. However, Ferrothorn isn't super far behind either. One could argue that it's hard to put a Pokemon that's largely support-oriented and kind of a reactionary force as opposed to a more direct force in a tier like Black and White this high. But in my opinion, it's actually a perfect fit. And here are a couple of reasons why. The move Spikes, and the move Knockoff, and the Steel typing. 3 very simple but very important reasons. First and foremost, Spikes are one of the main things to watch out for in team building. For example, A lot of Pokemon, like say Gastrodon or Amoonguss, are largely held back in team building if not paired with hazard removal, which also is why Excadrill is easily in the top 5 in my eyes. And spikes can just force progress so easily, because switches are happening. Pivoting is so prominent in Black-White overuse that those spikes are racking up things like Tyranitar, Politoed, opposing Ferrothorn, Excadrill, Breloom, Tentacruel, Keldeo, all of which find their way into my top 10 to 12 Pokemon, no doubt about it, are taking spikes damage and potential other residuals as well. And that's going to speed up the game flow rapidly. Especially seeing as there's no defog. Again, you have the hard rapid spin, which also means you're potentially taking Iron Barbs. You're switching in. You're not going to really be able to recover a ton. You could be blocked by ghost types like Jellicent, which admittedly is kind of on the rare end of things, but still, and so on and so forth. So the fact of the matter is that Ferrothorn, in its own way, is a very important catalyst for progress, but also it's one of the main walls to things like Latios and water types, such as Politoed, such as Keldeo's Hydro Pump if it's choice locked. Rotom Wash, well, you're going to be taking a burn, and that burn usually favors the Rotom Wash team early on in the games. That's a sequence I'll always try to evoke. Um, However, also with recent adaptations, they have learned Worry Seed, which helps against Gliscor, which helps against Bloom, which helps against Alakazam, even Ryu Nicholas, more importantly. That's very important. And on top of that, Knockoff is always a very delightful tool. Yeah, it can run dual hazards in a pinch with Stealth Rock Spikes, Knockoff in Power Whip, or even Gyro Ball potentially. And just the fact of the matter is that Ferrothorn is used on 9 out of 10 rain teams right now. And honestly, it's used on about half sand teams right now. The sheer usage of it just shows how important of a niche it has in this metagame. It's probably the most common Pokemon in a lot of people's team builders. It and Latios, of course, being atop the usage statistics in a lot of people's eyes and in a lot of people's personal experiences. So yeah, it really should be no shock that they're 1 and 2 in whatever order you may wish. Again, this is my personal favorite of order, but you can go either way. Other things that Ferrothorn's great for, it's just an amazing special sponge, and also being able to live 2 Earthquakes from even Excadrill if it's not adamant in sand, all Landorus, potential Garchomp, and even Gliscor could Worry Seed against or Leech Seed against. It's just spectacular in doing that. Um, but the biggest thing of all, of course, is Latios. Sometimes you can be taking Trick, of course, but being able to sponge Dracos from that is great. It's going to make facing Latios and Rain a lot more tolerable, as otherwise Surf is just going to trample through your sand teams. Um, Case in point, if you're bringing a team with, say, a couple ground types, Landorus, Excadrill, Latios of your own, Tyranitar, Ferrothorn, and Rotom Wash or Keldeo, just it's a normal, very standard example. Nothing is going to be able to switch in reliably, even not a Tyranitar at full health reliably, if you want to preserve it for something like a Thunderous Tear and Alakazam in the back. So therefore, Ferrothorn's your go-to. Ferrothorn's your glue. Ferrothorn's your sponge. And Ferrothorn's just the epitome of a defensive pivot in Black-White, as it has ways of making progress directly with Knockoff or indirectly with Spikes and Stealth Rock, or even with Power Whip against things like Rotom Wash, Excadrill, and Landorus T in the early to mid game. But it also is more of a reactionary element in that it's going to be switching in. It's kind of its usage is hinging on what they have offensively to throw at you, and how you apply it kind of depends on their strategy. But that kind of built-in versatility of Ferrothorn is something that I feel a lot of people don't really notice on the surface. But while it's a pretty linear Pokemon in what it does, it's able to really react to so many different offensive standpoints that you find yourself encountering in Black-White that I view Ferrothorn as undoubtedly one of the top 2 Pokemon. And I was talking to someone like ABR, who, in my eyes, is a top 10, 15 Black-White player right now. No doubt about it. He's very accomplished in the tier, despite it not being his main. And he said he'd even rank Ferrothorn above Latios. And while I do respect that standpoint, I think Latios is the centralizing force of Black-White AU, the big nuke, the main kind of offensive progress initiator. And I think that it's almost harder not to use Latios than it is to use it nowadays on a lot of settings. And that's why I used it 10 out of 10 times in SPL. It really was not a coincidence whatsoever. So I personally rank Gladius higher, but again, these guys, 1A, 1B, however you want to put it, 1, 2. I rank Gladius just a little bit higher, but this is definitely my tier 1. So now that we've got tier 1 out of the way, let's shift down to tier 2. I have Tyranitar, Landorus T, and Excadrill ranked. I'm actually going to give it a little spacing. Yeah, that's ideal. Okay. So right off the bat, Tyranitar is my number 3. Reasons being predominantly the fact that it sets up stand and it checks Latios with Pursuit. But also, aside from Latios, it's also a great reactionary measure to Alakazam and Ryu Nicholas due to having Chopple Berry in Pursuit. In general, the Chopple Berry sets about 90% of the transfer you see right now, with Choice Scarf being anywhere from 8 to 10%. And then you'll see the occasional Choice Band set, which really isn't great compared to Chopple Berry nowadays. You'll see Custap here and there. Even Shuka Berry with Ice Beam is viable. We've seen it in Smogon Tour a couple times way back when. I think Sweepage used it at some point and actually got a really big kill with Ice Beam. And I know V2 used it on the team that Manaphy used against me in Black White Cup with Avalanche, which is kind of peculiar, but hey, you do what you can with it. But regardless of the setup, Tyranitar is one of the most amazingly versatile Pokemon in Black White, and while it tends to just run Crunch plus Pursuit with Chapel Berry and then either Stealth Rock or, you know, Earthquake slash Fire Blast slash Superpower, and then if not Stealth Rock, then it could be Ice Beam or the Fire move there. Even you've seen potential Dragon Tail or Thunder Wave or Taunt. There are a myriad of viable options, is what I'm trying to say. And I did a whole video dedicated to why Chople Tyranitar has so much staying power in Black White and why it's just such a phenomenal Pokemon. And I could give you countless replays citing how practical Chople Berry is, how many times it can play. But just to cite practical examples, while obviously any Latios can be trapped by Tyranitar in a timely fashion, being able to handle things like Thunderous T, which is running Focus Blast more and more as of late, gravitating away from the substitute plus Nasty Blast set that's so unpopularized, with free attacks just being great to directly nuke Ferrothorn and Excadrill. On top of that, it's also superb for the Psychic types like Ryu, Nicholas, and Alakazam. Technically, they are second tier Psychic types behind Latios, of course, but they're still superb options, and they're both within my top 15, which we'll get to in a bit. Just to dive into a bit more detail, Tyranitar can come in and pretty much click Pursuit without doubt against Alakazam, and it has 2 Focus Blasts to kill you. Something running Grass out just for that, but that doesn't even Tokyo without Stealth Rocks and it being more offensive tar, or Stealth Rock and Spikes versus a fully special defensive tar. So that's cool. But yeah, forcing damage on Tyranitar sometimes it's all you need to do if you're paired with another Psychic type. But that just is a testament to how great Tyranitar is. In addition, against Rain teams, obviously being able to remove Rain for Sand is huge. It really negates the effectiveness of things like Tentacle or even Politoed of your own. And it makes things like Thunder less accurate, Hurricane less accurate, forces Focus Blast, and remove Latios, and cut down on things like Surf's power as well, which is pretty huge. So yeah, Tyranitar, well, it's not like a hard counter to many things. It's kind of in the essence of Black White that it's such a soft jack, such a practical Pokemon, such a proactive counterplay piece to so many things that you're kind of puzzling it together as opposed to like directly hard countering things. And Tyranitar is just the essence of that in and of itself. And that's why I think Tyranitar is the third best Pokemon. During SPL, I actually would have ranked the fourth Pokemon, Landorus T, above it. And I got kind of cutting my time short in Tyranitar, but I have a whole video up on my channel, so feel free to check that out if you will. I'm sure it's in my suggestions, but also it's in my metagame analysis playlist, if you will. Check those out as well. But you don't have to, of course, no big deal. Just if you want to hear more on Tyranitar. But that aside, Landorus T probably would have won third during SPL metagame just because Leftover set was taking metagame by storm. But right now I'd put it fourth. Choice Scarf and Leftovers Landorus T are both superb. There are also some fringe sets such as Fighting Gem with Swords Dance, or even the Rare Smackdown or Gravity set as well. Personally, I don't rate those as highly, and I don't think they factor into its tier 2 placement. However, the Leftover Stealth Rock set is a phenomenal tank. It can run speed or bulk. It lets it check things like Breloom, Excadrill, non-mixed Garchomp, Tyranitar lacking Ice Beam, and sets up Stealth Rock with ease while having a great matchup against Tentacle outside of Rain. Be able to kill it with Earthquake with ease, assuming they run the faster set, which you see more often, and of course against opposing Excadrill, which are the 2 dominant spinners in the tier. On top of that, it just does a lot of survivability with Leftovers, and Earthquake plus Hidden Power with U-Turn's a pain enough to switch into. You're thinking, oh, I have Rotom W, it's fine. Rotom W is taking 25 from U-Turn, plus 12.5 from Stealth Rocks, plus Sand negates the potential Leftovers recovery. On top of that, it also might take a burn early game from something like opposing Rotom Watch or a knockoff from Ferrothorn. So all of a sudden, you're like, oh shit, I took one U-turn and all of a sudden my Rotom Watch is basically dead. Yeah, that tends to happen a lot in Black White. Hidden Power Ice plus Earthquake pretty much threatens the rest of the tier, and once you pair it with Pursuit for things like Latios, or Latios of your own for threatening things like Balloon or Thunderous T, it's huge. It's actually an menacing threat without choice. Of course, equipping with choice lets you be a Scarf user. That could be a great revenge killer, outrunning things like Alakazam, Latios, and Keldeo that's not Scarf, and doing a ton of damage. There are a lot of teams that have everything outright Tokyo'd by a 4-attack variant of Landorus T, and that's just how it is. Pivoting around it is crucial, and it only gets in so many times due to Stealth Rock, but you can potentially pair it with Excadrill Spin, so on and so forth. I do personally rank Landorus T just above Excadrill. Excadrill is great with spinning, and also it's a phenomenal breaker with Earth Power, Earthquake plus Iron Head with the Sand Force boost in Sand. However, the downsides of it are it's kind of frail naturally. A lot of its convenient defensive typing is still getting nuked by things like anything boosted by Rain, or Latios with Surf, or pretty much any Earthquake or a super effective hit like Superpower Earthquake from Tyranitar, so it has to be cautious when proceeding. It does run Protect and Scout things, and it can live a single hit from a Calm Mind and Nicholas, which is always cool. But it does take advantage of a lot of chip and natural built-in progress from other teammates to potentially turn 2 hit KOs into 1 hit KOs or 3 hit KOs into 2 hit KOs against things like Ferrothorn, against things like Landorus C, and so on and so forth. Yeah, in general, Extra is ridiculously strong with the Sandforce set, and it can run a special defensive Bonebreaker set, which could even allow it to use things like Toxic or Stealth Rock, which is always cool in moderation as a utility presence. Choice Scarf sets aren't that great, and not why I ranked it this high, but it is the premier spinner in a tier that is increasingly spike centric, so without a doubt, I'm ranking Extra in tier 2, and I'm just putting it a tad below Blander's T, but I think you could argue either way. But we're gonna proceed. I don't want this video to take forever, and we're probably gonna get a bit more quick once we get past the top 10. It's pretty much past this point, but without a doubt, we're gonna go into some detail on the tier 3 Pokemon as well here. First and foremost, Politoed, the Inducer of Rain, and obviously a staple on every single Rain team. The defensive set's the one you see almost always. Without Hypnosis, the Choice Scarf set is lackluster, and honestly, even during the last months of Sleep metagame, the Choice Scarf set was really poor in general. It's just not a sufficient revenge killer, and it doesn't get in a ton, and it's super vulnerable to Pursuit, doing a ton of damage, and it's even taking a hell of a ton of damage from like random Earthquakes as well. And being able to switch into those with the defensive set's great. Scald plus Toxic makes you a proactive threat. Encore is superb for things like Ferrothorn, Ryu Nicholas, even opposing Politoed as well. And it's just a ton of practical output. You could also refresh. Ice Beam's an option. Psychic if you failure Toxic Stroke for some reason. Perish Song for Ryu Nicholas in the end game as well. And so on and so forth. In general, defensive Politoed has a lot of merit. You could even run especially defensive if you're a BKC type and like taking Alakazam and Latios with more ease. You just lose out on the Earthquake potential, which you can switch into with a more physically defensive Ferrothorn. It's just that Rain appreciates more, especially defensive Ferrothorn right now to take Dracos reliably, as it actually resists Draco Meteor, unlike Politoed. But yeah, Politoed is the Rain Inducer, and it has actually a lot of effectiveness, despite being a pretty shit mon in general. For example, it was NU and DPP, and now it's shooting to the top of OU solely because of its ability. Of course, it's not new Umon. Regardless of the ability, it is solely because of Drizzle, but Drizzle is just that great, and it has a nice set of tools to make it at least a practical pick within the context of the metagame, so it's always cool. So Politoed is something I rank in number 6 slot, and you could argue Tentacle should be right below it, as it is a staple on pretty much all Rain teams right now. It is so much better than things like, say, Starmie right now. Starmie is just an unreliable spinner, and it doesn't abuse Rain like Rain Dish Tentacle does. However, you are seeing some Starmie range, you are seeing some extra range, even if they're few and far between. So I couldn't quite rank Tentacle 7th, as there are 2 Pokemon in between it that are both metagame defining presences that I need to mention within the middle of tier 3 as well. Rotom Wash being the first one. Rotom Wash is the ultimate pivot. It's just the epitome of black-white in a Pokemon, if you will. It's always forcing progress. It's very hard to hard stop it, even against things like Gastrodonic Force Wisp. The main thing is Poison Overloom, which we're going to get to in a minute. Even then, you can Volt Switch into it. It comes in and it counters things like Excadrill. It can soft check things like Landorus T in the initial sequences of games. It's great against Rain teams. It's one of the best leads if you're not facing an opposing Breloom or a Choice Banded Dragon. Leading with it's always able to force progress. In general, Rotom W is just a superb option in the metagame. And while there are things that can keep it in check, and there are recent techs like Poison Overloom with Protect and even Refresh Seismitoad, it's just super easy to abuse. Forcing burns on things like Ferrothorn, or forcing Volt Switches in things like Latios that help get things like Tyranitar in, just goes such a long way. It's just an amazing door opener in Black-White. It's amazing glue Pokemon. And while it isn't a hard counter to a ton of things, it's still such a great check to things like Excadrill, things like Landorus T, things like Politoed. If you scroll up, you could even argue it can soft check Tyranitar, it can cripple Ferrothorn, it can take it from Latios and pivot out. Very soft check to Keldeo and Gliscor as well. Be a switch into Heatran. But yeah, it's just this momentum hog of a Pokemon is just a great addition to the metagame. And there's a reason why people like myself, BKC, are such strong advocates for it in the current metagame as a momentum generator. And it just kind of fits the essence of Black-White as just such a momentum-oriented Pokemon that it's really hard to misuse it. It's really hard to make a team with Rotom W that's like flat out not going to win some games unless it's facing some of the more dramatic extremes in metagames and less than ideal events that happen in the early portions of games. So yeah, Rotom W kind of kindles the flame of Black-White for a lot of players, myself included, and just keeps the metagame proactive and away from passive, nonsensical bullshit like Tourias like Boros tend to devolve into, which is why I have a special place in my heart always for Black-White OU. So shout out to the washing machine. Transitioning into Balloon, A Pokemon that I also made a huge video on, and why I think it's just one of the most unique Pokemon in Black White. It's truly timeless, as it went from running all sorts of Poison Heal sets in Black White 1 to abusing Technician as an offensive powerhouse in Black White 2. Then it's sort of a role between the two, but with Spore Bandits now pretty much transitioned to Poison Heal sets, and we see the invention of the Substitute plus Protect plus Focus Punch plus Seed Bomb set, which Dice popularized and has honestly taken that game by storm for a couple weeks there in SPL. But in general, it's very annoying to play against. There's also the Bulk Up set, the Facade sets, such as Sword Dance Facade, which I personally popularized. And last but not least, you also see sets that can run Toxic, which can help cripple things such as the aforementioned Landorus T, or even Latios, and you protect and you kind of scalp for pursuit. It's also great if you Toxic something like Garchomp, or even, say, you pair it with, hmm, um, you pair it with something like Tyranitar, for example, and you toxic into Politoed. It tries to like encore you, or it tries to switch in on Protect to get Rain up. Then all of a sudden, that Politoed's on a timer. It has to click refresh, and then you get your Tyranitar safely to reset weather. And just little sequences like those, they go such a long way, using prediction, if you will, because they're predicting Protect, they're predicting Focus Punch, they're predicting so many little things. Because Breloom is such a versatile Pokemon within the little niche of Poison Heal that in practice, it's actually just such a great option. So yeah, there are just a lot of great things you do with Poison Overloom. It's a really cool splashable Pokemon. It's one of the main answers to Red and Wash as well, which is cool. It also can cock block Tentacool, even in rain, if it lacks Vanish Shock, Sludge Bomb, or the very rare Ice Beam. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So yeah, Breloom is great. You could also run Technician sets, specifically Choice Banded for attacks. Obviously, it loses a bit of effectiveness with Spore, but in a way, losing Spore made the other sets a lot better, one more recognizable, and it shifted nicely into the Black-White metagame. So yeah, something to keep in mind. And lastly but not least, Tentacool, pretty much a staple on Modern Rain in my eyes. My Rains are pretty much always Politoed, Tentacool, Ferrothorn, with 3 other Pokemon, which tend to be like Latios, Thundurus T, Keldeo, Landorus T, Tornadus. I even have one with Alakazam, Dragonite. Yeah, there are like a bunch of French fillers. Even Extra can fit in the mix. Garchomp. Yeah, you name it. But those are like the big 3 in Rain. And Tentacool is just such a great addition to Rain teams. With Rain Dish, Protect, it's just such a nuisance. You can run a subset and stall the living bejesus out of everything. You can run Toxic for Rotom Wash, for Dragonite. You can run Speed also for Landorus T and Excadrill. Those skulls off in the rain, that's great. Of course, it's a premier rapid spinner as well. And if you get a burn or a knock on Ferrothorn, it can go a long way in removing spikes or potential rocks from Tyranitar, especially if you get rain up. And you also have a million chances to burn Tyranitar, which is always cool as well, unless it's during Earthquake, in which case it always 2 KOs. You gotta be careful there. But yeah, Tentacool is just kind of a really great addition to rain teams. Rain distribution is so nice, and I feel like a lot of people understate how effective it can be in the context of the metagame just because it's Tentacool, which is seen as kind of like a mediocre French Pokemon, but in reality, Rain Dish plus Protect lets it soft check so many things, and also it has a natural typing that makes it do well against Keldeo. And in a way, it kind of combats Rotom Wash really nicely, as it can Toxic it or burn it, and then in the long haul kind of stalled out, whereas Volt Switch never 2 kills it. Of course, Volt Switch and Tyranitar can be problematic, so you gotta be careful there. It's also really cool in combating Heatran, and things like Skarmory it pretty much completely makes useless, so yeah, it goes a long way there. All in all, Tentacool is definitely a great Pokemon. In rounding out my top 10, I have a bit of a surprise pick. A lot of people wouldn't see this as top 10 Pokemon in Black White, but in my humble opinion, Thundurus T is definitely a top 10 Pokemon in Black White. It's the secondary, best rain abuser behind Tentacool, but it's the best offensive rain abuser right now. Thunder, Hidden Power Ice, Focus Blast, Substitute. You can run Nest, Better Agility. It's just so great. Nothing truly counters it. Even Gastrodon isn't going to be able to take 2 Focus Blast plus Stealth Rock and Spike if they're a knockoff or something like that, or Toxic, or Focus Blast is doing 43, 45%, for example, from Modest Thundurus T, which is the best variance of it. They tend to run bulk with sub, yeah. Because they're on physically defensive to try and check Keldeo and ground types, as you're already checking especially defensive shit like Hydro Pump, regardless, due to your Storm Drain. So yeah, it's worth noting. But of course, even to it killing Latios and Virus is so clutch, and Thunder plus Focus Blast just devastates everything. Of course, you have to rely on accuracy in Sand or with Focus Blast against Tyranitar, against Heatran, against Ferrothorn, against Excadrill. It's admittedly a fault of it reliant upon accuracy, but it's just such a great option, and you should never be fearful of running a Thundurus T on Rain, as it's always going to be making progress if it's not completely blind. The bulkier sets with Substitute, being able to take Power Whip from Ferrothorn and Body Slam from Jirachi are indeed surging in usage, and even Sub 3 attack or Sub Nasty Flop's great. I use Sub Agility against Fakes, and it worked absolute wonders for me, which is superb. But yeah, all things considered, Thunderous T is a great option. It is the single most threatening rain abuser in the metagame, and arguably, aside from Latios, the single most threatening Pokemon in the metagame outright. Moving on to other threatening Pokemon that not only do well in rain, but also just great in general, is Keldeo. One could argue that I snubbed it a little bit, putting it behind Thunderous T and even behind Tentacle, but personally, I think it's kind of settled into a really nice place in the metagame, but it's still a little behind these Pokemon in my eyes. The Choice Scarf set on rain has lost a lot of traction, as we're still seeing some of Moonbeam's usage, but also its ability to break sand teams is just not great. It's really limited only to like a rain cleaner that excels against opposing rain once Tentacle takes some chip, but otherwise is just kind of it's a good revenge killer, but it's not a great breaker. And the Choice Scarf Keldeo used to kind of be like French Broken in rain. So yeah, however, the metagame has shifted to Choice Specs Keldeo in rain, and that is one of the most insane breakers. Only thing that counters it is Jellicent. Otherwise, it's always 2-killing everything with Hydro Pump and Rain. Even the sturdiest of resist like Ferrothorn taking north of 40% by that. Rotom get 2-kill by Stealth Rock after that. Latios is taking north of 60% from Hydro Pump and Rain from Specs Keldeo, so on and so forth. It's just an absurd nuke. One of the strongest Pokemon in the metagame. And it's able to come in decently enough against things like Tranitar, taking an Earthquake, something coming against Heatran, you name it. It's nice natural bulk. It's kind of something that's understated. It also always lives with Scarf Draco, which is cool. It could even live an unboosted Psychic from Rio Nicholas. That could come in handy potentially. So yeah, Subcom mindsets also have a nice use in rain teams as their variant tentacle go a long way in that matchup. And beyond that, I also have ran recently a 4-attack set with Fighting Gem. Extra Belt Leftover is also viable in that. I ran it in ROAPL, and while that's not why it's in Tier 4 and one of the top 11 Pokemon in Black Widow U, I think it's very worthwhile denoting that Keldeo just is a built-in versatility that can help it go a long way. But yeah, Keldeo with Specs is just probably the best set right now. It's phenomenal. Of course, you could also run a Protect Toxic variant on Sand, but that has died out a little bit in recent months, so that's unfortunate. But yeah, Keldeo, just one of the best rain pieces as well. I rank it just a tad below Thunderous T, but really interchangeable. And it's definitely seen better days, but still Keldeo is one of the premier Pokemon in Black White overused. Moving downward, we have Rio Nicholas and Alakazam, two of the most controversial Black White Pokemon, Magic Guard abusers, although they do it in very different fashions. Rio Nicholas is obviously much slower and more finesse-oriented with the Calm Mindset, or even Trick Room. Trick Room plus Recover, in my opinion, is superb, but also Trick Room Shadow Ball is great too. So yeah, Renix has a lot of great options, and with Magic Guard, it's able to negate Sand, Status, Hazards, etc., which is great. In general, Rio Nicholas is just a good option. Calm Mind, Rio Nicholas is one of the most polarized Pokemon in the metagame, and you could argue for it having a spot in the top 10 because of that, as a lot of teams are underprepared. However, due to the offensive presences of things like Sandforce Excadrill, of Chople Tyranitar, of Trick Specs Latios, of Rain Boosted Thunders and Hydro Pumps, especially when paired with the fact that paralysis is fairly common in the metagame right now, and the ability to move items with trick and knockoff is fairly common. Limiting Rio Nicholas can prevent it from sweeping. However, a late game Rio Nicholas, if paired with the right support and right game planning, is still really impossible to deal with for rain teams and even the strongest of sand teams. So Rio Nicholas is a ridiculously unique Pokemon, and it kind of goes against the grain of Black White. It's not one of the like direct progress oriented Pokemon. It's more of a finesse, bulky win conditioning. But with Magic Card, that is enabled as all of these different forms of useful chip and residuals that kind of make Black White as productive as they are, due to the lack of defog, the lack of limited weather turns, are kind of negated by Magic Guard. It's what lets Rio Nicholas go against the flow and be such a unique, special win condition in the tier. Not taking damage from Stealth Rock, Spikes, Sand, Burn, Poison, all those things. It's huge. And that's kind of what makes Rio Nicholas such a unique pick in the metagame, and why I personally think it's just great with Calm Mind, and also kind of secondarily the Trick Room variant as well. Alakazam is basically the offensive variant of Rio Nicholas. It's very fast, it's ridiculously frail, and almost always runs Focus Sash, but a great cleaner. And the fact that it's Focus Sash and utility is great. Focus Blast or Grass Knot is great for Tyranitar, and Focus Blast is great for Excadrill and Heatran as well. All worth noting. Trying to think a bit deeper here. So what was I saying? Yeah, Alakazam. I rank it a bit below Rio Nicholas just because I feel as if the metagame is kind of very prepared for it. Chople Tyranitar is at an all-time high. We're seeing Scarfers that handle it well, like Landorus T with U-turn, or Latios to outrun it and not get killed by it while Twig-yelling it, of course. That's great, but Alakazam is an amazing matchup against Grain teams with Focus Blasts, and Psychic is super devastating. Honestly, a lot of pressure does boil down to Focus Blast accuracy, which is also why I'm a bit of a deterrent to it. But yeah, all things considered, it's a great utility. It's amazing with spikes and sandstream. All those residual damages playing to its advantage. It's just such a great abuser of the metagame state of black white. Really being able to seize all of the residual damage and initial progress made in the opening turns of games to be a great cleaner or force kills later on in games and force progress. Admittedly, Psychic isn't the most strong move. For example, it can't 2 KO things like Rotom Wash, especially defensive sets after Stealth Rock, and it really lacks 1 KO potential. For example, things like Thunderous Sea always live off their Stealth Rock, or Shadow Ball or Hidden Bars are never killing something like Latios, but it's fine because all you need to 2 KO those things anyway with Sash. Admittedly, picking coverage is always kind of hard. Psychic, Focus Blast, Hidden Power Ice, Grass Knot, Hidden Power Fire, Knockoff, Encore, Thunderwave, all very viable options. Signal Beam as well for Celebi, something I've been using a lot lately. And of course, Shadow Ball, Timeless Move, and Alakazam as well. So yeah, they're a lot of options, but sometimes that does limit it. But anyway, Alakazam's great, Renix is great. They deserve their spots here. One could argue Renix will move a little bit up due to the Calm Mindset. That's fine. One could argue Alakazam could be a little higher than Renix even, because Soak Sash is just as good as it is. I completely understand either way. And then we have 2 ground types. Personally, I put Gliscor just a head above Garchomp for probably the first time ever in Black White. Gliscor has surged up recently. It's great. The Taunt set saw a lot of usage in 2018, but now the Swords Dance set's great. And also sets with like Nox for attack. Even Stealth Rock set saw an appearance in SPL. It's just a great utility Pokemon. And it's kind of one of these modern, balance-oriented techs that can slow the game down and kind of seize progress, if you will, in Black White. And I feel like the long-term ramifications of the progress Gliscor makes in the early game, the chip that it generates, the ability to kind of slow things down is just so great. And that's why I view Poison Gliscor as just an absurdly practical addition to the metagame. And why I feel like it deserves just a slight placement of Garchomp, which kind of is suffering from an identity crisis right now. As segueing to Garchomp, the Choice Scarf set just isn't as great as it once was, admittedly. Despite the lack of Skarmory, I kind of want to try and bring it back, but I'm not sure how possible that's going to be. Regardless of that fact, though, Scarf Chomp's great, and you should never underestimate it. Keep that in mind. I think that Scarf Garchomp honestly could come back. It's just not as great, but Swords Dance Jirachi is great. Lum sets are good. Life Orb Nyx is great. There's this one team that I love using with it right now. There are a ton of different practical applications. Honestly, Garchomp's one of the most cool and versatile Pokemon. So please try and fit it on your teams. I know it's not as easy as Landorus or Gliscor or Exeter right now, and there's so much competition in those fronts, but it is such amazing upside, arguably higher than all of those Pokemon put together. So yeah, and with Yachi Bear, it can be such a nice soft check to things like Thunderous Tea, or even Keldeo outside of Rain, and Swords Dance up against Nicholas, taking it from Alakazam, you name it. So yeah, that's great. All in all, Garchomp's a great Pokemon, but it kind of suffers from an identity crisis right now, and I'm hoping to see better days where the metagame shifts more in its favor. We started seeing that late during SPL, but unfortunately the tournament ended, and then we were kind of left seeing if it would be like rise back to top tier prominence or not, and I think it's just below that stage right now, but it's still, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Still in my top 15 and in tier 4, which is some of the best of the best Pokemon. So yeah, seeing as Black White's a pretty centralized and small metagame, being in the top 15 means that you're still seeing 10% or above usage. You're still seeing a lot of consistency, and that's great. There's definitely a big drop off in tier 4, which is like what I consider like the end of like the A ranks, and like the top tiers, and tier 5, which is kind of like A minus into B rank, B plus rank, if you will, in a viability standard perspective. So yeah, we have Heatran, Magnezone, Dragonite, Mamoswine, Tracheon, and Skarmory. I'm going to skimp out on the little details here. Of course, I'm still going to go and explain why all these Pokemon are as good as they are, but I just can't give them the same level of attention as this will be an hour-long video. I can make a whole video just explaining why Heatran and Magnezone are great in Black-White, of course. All the steel types in Black-White in general, really, but I'm not going to do that. That's not for today. Maybe for a future day. If you want that, let me know in the comments. But yeah, Heatran, a lot of people say it's lackluster in Black White, especially a lot of newer players. And I think this is just because like of rain and ground phobia, if you will, because that's the direction of the metagame. But truth be told, it's just one of the best stops to a couple of things like Mixed Jirachi, like Ferrothorn, being able to sponge Latios, being able to outrun and kill Breloom is great. Actually, it can cripple Rotom Wash and Water types. It's low-key really nice against Ferrothorn plus Tentacle plus Positive Ranges. It can force issue on all of them. It does lose to 1v1 to a lot of things. Some of you are like, wait, what the hell? I can't do it. But also, make sure you're Volcarona proof. There are just so many little things you add to the team building checklist. It beats the shit out of pretty much the entirety of tier 6 besides Starmie, which is great. But yeah, Heatran has seen a lot better days in Black White. It's not great right now, but it's still good. It's still good. Stealth Rock's good. Sub's good. Magnestone's good. Getting it in is always just a little more challenging than it once was, but still, Heatran is a great option, and you shouldn't skimp out on it. Magnezone, obviously great for trapping. Shell is virtually non-existent in Black White, even on Skarmory right now. It opens doors, It's best on Drag Mag. Fitting it onto sand teams is really hard right now. There are a very limited amount. There are a finite number of builds of Magnezone on sand or even on rain. But on weatherless, it's great, especially in Drag Mag. And those teams alone pretty much have Magnezone as the face of them. So that's kind of my like rough ranking of Drag Mag, if you will. But also the balloon set, just has a ton of practical applications. It can trap Excadrill, it can trap Rain, Ferrothorn, of course. Yeah, it even is great at just forcing progress. A lot of teams struggle to switch into Magnezone, for example. They are forced to go to Latios or Rotom W and take a lot of damage from Thunderbolt plus potential Stealth Rock Sand, you know it. So yeah, that's great. Next Pokemon is kind of a polarizing figure in Black-White. Something that actually used to be a top-tier Pokemon, abusing multi-scale in the early days, but has seen much worse days, and now is kind of surging a little back up with the Sub-Dragon Dance set. Dragonite. And Sub-Dragon Dance with Roost is just phenomenal. It straight up beats a lot of teams, but it is admittedly kind of cheesy. Some people even are dubbing it as Cheese Night. Personally, I was like that initially, but now I'm like, wait, it actually has a lot of effective use, and if you game plan around it, it's going to do great. However, it's still a bit limited. There are still some rough matchups for it. I must admit that. There are shortcomings to it. So yeah, it's not like one of the top 10, 12 Pokemon. You could argue for both Heatran and Magnezone for sure, but not much higher than that. And of course, Choice Band is great. Mix has some niche value. Whole ton of rain sets you could explore with. Choice Band is great now, especially because you don't have Sleep Dogs, so you could run like Ice Punch for Landers seeing Gliscor 1 KOs without locking into Outrage in particular. That's always cool. But yeah, Dragonite's Choice Band set also has Extreme Speed, which is just a potent tool against offense and rain in particular. So that's always great. Yeah, on top of that, it's just really versatile and multi-scale is a cool ability, even if it does require some support. Moving forward, Mamoswine is something that I rate higher than most. I've been using it a lot lately, and it's just impossible to counter. There's so many options, with Skarmory being at an all-time low. It's especially great as it's not reliant on flinches. Personally, I like Sub with Nevermelt Ice and Adamant, Ice Shard, Earthquake, Ice and Crash, of course. It's just really great to deal with, and Ice Shard is super great against a lot of top-tier Pokemon. Landorus, T, Latios, Breloom, Thundurus is huge. Good score, Garchomp, Breaking Sash, Alakazam. So yeah, it's just a super practical Pokemon. While it doesn't 1v1 a ton on paper, it's actually impossible to deal with in the late game once everything's shipped, especially things like Rotom Wash. And if you get a sub up, then my god, good luck with that. Personally, I find it viable on very limited number of sand and rain builds, as well as weatherless, but there still are very good, consistent builds with it. And I implore you guys to try it out more. It's a great Pokemon, and I actually rank it above Trakan, which is probably a shock to a lot of people, as Trakan's always been a force to be reckoned with Black-White, and in particular, the choice bands and Swords and sets have surged again within the last year or so, after taking a kind of a slight dip for a year or two before that. And I think Swords Dance Trackdown is great. Personally, I think Choice Band isn't great, but Rock Gem is kind of the shit. Life Orb's okay as well. Yeah, you could run Rock Pots, you could run Substitute, you could run Protect, all those good last moves. Personally, Protect is probably the best and most consistent. To scout for things like Choice Latios, to scout for things like Landorus T. But Sub is really cool because you could sub on Protect from Breloom turn 1, or on a Predicted Switch without using Prediction. So yeah, regardless, Swords Dance Rock Gem, there are no real hard counters to it in the metagame. It's always forcing progress. It's just such a great breaker, and I happen to just love Trakan right now. Skarmory is something I put at the end of Tier 5. You can honestly argue it for Tier 6, but how the mighty have fallen, oh my goodness. It's just so poor against Tentacle Rain, and Magnezone is a bit more common than normal, and Ferrothorn is just needed as ever defensively. It also just falls down hard to Rotom. So yeah, Skarmory is a very limited Pokemon. I don't love it. I wish it was a bit better in the metagame, honestly, but it's still a Premier Spiker. It does great against ground types like Excadrill, Landorus T, and could even do super good against Garchomp that's not mixed. On top of this, it's good against Breloom and against non-mixed Tyranitar, so there's definitely niche, especially since you can take a Draco or a Focus Blast in a pinch from things like Latios and Alakazam, respectively, while whirlwinding out one of the few phasers that are viable in metagames. So yeah, Skarmory has a unique skill set that can kind of bring a lot to teams. However, the fact that it does so poorly against Tentacle, against Rotom Wash, it's kind of dead weight in those matchups. It's very hard to use. I wouldn't label it as cheese so much as I just label it as an inconsistent spiker option right now that has a lot of upside defensively. Moving on to Tier 6, more fringe Pokemon, if you will. I have Amoonguss, Starmie, Germback, Scizor, and Xatu listed. A lot of people are wondering, oh, where is Jellicent? Or where is... There are a few things that I probably could argue to include, but these are Pokemon that specifically right now are trending back upwards after seeing prolonged period of downward stretches. So let's go through them one by one. Amoonguss, people are like, oh damn, after sport, it sucks. And you know what? It did lose a lot of viability. You could argue it was top 10 at one point before then. If not, definitely top 12. But it's still great because physically defensive, Amoonguss is the best Breloom check to exist ever, even facade variants. And being able to run Sludge Wave plus Hidden Power Ice plus Gig Drain is cool coverage. The thing is that against Ferrothorn teams, you never want to burn them. You never want to paralyze them with Sunspore, and you never really run a Kinbar Fire anymore, so it's really clunky against Marathon, which is the main like pin in the ass for Moongus, and honestly what holds it back and puts it all the way into tier 6. But it's still a great defensive option. Hidden Power Ice against ground and physically defensive. It's great. It still sponges Rotom Wash and Politoed with ease, and can check Keldeo outside of rain. So yeah, it's a good option, but there are some drawbacks to it, of course. Which leads me to another Pokemon that's very imperfect, but has some abilities in Black White and Starmie, which is kind of like the third leg of the spinning trio, if you will. It's seen so much better days, and I wouldn't even call it bad so much as just overshadowed by Tentacle right now, and it's very hard to fit on sand teams, if you're not named Dice, of course. In general, Starmie, the pursuit weakness is unfortunate, the fragility isn't great. The fact of the matter is that it's kind of limited. Offensive sets are okay on like Drag Mag in a sense, and also okay on rain teams, but it's just not as good as Spinner Tentacle. It doesn't offer the defensive premiums it does, and it forces games to go far more fast paced than you'd like when you kind of want to feel things out. It makes getting specific turns right super crucial, and pressuring Firethorn of the utmost importance when just forcing that issue isn't always ideal, given the pace of these like Thunderous, Politoed, Ferrothorn builds right now that kind of play a bit more towards bulky offense and hyper offense in the range spectrum. So yeah, Starmie's just kind of a misfit in the metagame, but it's still Starmie and Black White after all. I've seen days when it's been a top 15, even top 10 pick in the metagame, so you can't count it out completely. It's still here. Turn Black, pretty much Choice Band Outrage. All I have to say, Drag Mag, Choice Band Outrage, yeah, blah blah blah. Scizor, a reactionary measure to teams with multiple Psychic types. There's Pursuit that's super convenient, and admittedly, it took me forever to accept it as a viable option, but yeah, it is a viable option. There are only very limited builds with it, and they all have holes and trade-offs that are huge, but they do great against Psychic Spam, or dual Psychic teams, if you will, with Pursuit. They kind of invalidate Latios that isn't using Spec Surf, if you will. Of course, it doesn't even counter Latios, because Surf and Rain, or Choice Spec Surf, does 2 KO it, and it can force 50-50s with Latios at full health, but it's enough of a measure against it to deter it. Same for Alakazam, even Ryu Nicholas does great against, so yeah, Scizor is a bit of a streaky Pokemon with a very high ceiling. It has seen so many better days. Swords Dance sets I kind of view as very inconsistent and not why I rank it here, but it's good enough to just barely crack the top 25. And last, the lone sleeper by top 25, the lone Pokemon that a lot of people are like, whoa, what the fuck? You put Xatu here. And you know, Xatu is only good against Ferrothorn and rain teams. Literally everything else in rain teams it loses to, period. But being so good against Ferrothorn is great because it's used a lot of times. You could also just get a lot of utility out of it. You could enable things like Sub or Swords Dance Extra Drill, which is really cool. And it fits onto a lot of sand builds right now. The Italians like Rise have been using it lately. It's also a staple on the very rare Sun team, which isn't good enough to warrant top 25 usage, but I'm putting it here. I personally think Xatu is underexplored, and I'm curious to see more and more of it in the future. There are a ton of things you could argue. I'll pull up the viability rankings right now. Do I owe you viability rankings V3? Yeah, and you could argue for things like well, we covered all the A rank, but you could argue for things like Gyarados, Volcarona, Slowbro in particular, Celebi. Yeah, I think Celebi you probably could put over Xatu, and you wouldn't get any hesitation from me. Even Seismitoad as well, and Chansey. But that's really it. Everything down here is pretty mediocre. Yeah, but going back to the PM, this is a Pokemon I'd rank top 25 in Black White. I hope you enjoyed the explanations in the video. Please leave comments below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you like my content in general. I try very hard to make this as accurate and thorough as I can. And I think I give some really great information on the top 5 or 10 Pokemon in the metagame. And then I went down the list and explained the other ones well as well. So, yeah, this is Finch. Have a really nice night, guys. Peace.